energy drinks, are they the public health disaster that your parents are warning you of? Or is it more of an expensive placebo that tastes like nuclear sweethearts? Today, I, a drug scientist, am going to give you the breakdown on energy drinks, including 5-Hour Energy. So the energy drink market has exploded recently. So we're talking about more than about 100 new energy drinks appear every single year, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And people are starting to drink them even younger and younger. So 1 in every 10 adolescents is a daily user of energy drinks, and 1 in 5 children between the ages of 3 and 10 had consumed it in the last year. So these are not even adolescents. These are like preteens and preteens, also known as children. Now, one of the reasons that we see that so many teens and youths are using energy drinks is because the advertising is specifically targeted towards them. So look at your next can of energy drink. Look at the bright colors. Does it resemble anything like children's cereal advertising? And in most places, there's very little regulation of this industry, especially in places like the United States. So they are sold as their own functional energy drink, so a different type of beverage. And so they basically have no rules. They still have to list their ingredients, but they don't necessarily have to say if they're safe or if they do anything. And that's the second question. Do energy drinks actually do anything? They're being sold as functional products, meaning that they're supposed to actually do something for you. And supposedly they'll help with things like sports performance, as well as things like fatigue, like maybe you're sleep deprived and tired and you need to wake up. So do energy drinks work? Well, we do see that caffeine works decently well. Most of the time, caffeine will work for things like reaction time, things like increasing memory, but mostly if you're already sleep deprived. But let's make this a little bit more specific. So does 5-Hour Energy drink work? Well, in most cases, no. So basically all of the studies have said that 5-Hour Energy does not actually really do much of anything. And these studies found that people thought that they worked, so they perceived them as working, which could lead to a placebo effect, but they weren't actually doing much of anything. Now, there was one study that said that 5-Hour Energy did work to increase things like memory and cognitive performance. I'm not sure why this one was different from the others, and it was weirdly sponsored by a law firm. For what reason, I have no clue, but there is one that says 5-Hour Energy does do something. The problem with these studies and with most of the energy drink studies is that they do not have a proper control. Like, y'all, do your work correctly. So in these studies, they were mostly comparing an energy drink to another drink that tasted the same but had none of the components in energy drinks. They didn't have the taurine, and they also didn't have the caffeine. Most of these studies can't tell you if energy drinks are working or if an equal amount of caffeine would work just as well, without the weird added benefits and huge amount of sugar and genuinely strange taste. Now, some energy drinks have different ingredients in it. So 5-Hour Energy is supposed to be better because it doesn't have sugar in it. And there are suggestions that for sleep-deprived people, sugar can actually make them feel more tired. So they're like, 5-Hour Energy is better for feeling less sleep-deprived, less fatigued, because you don't have that sugar that will kind of mellow that. But again, not great evidence of 5-Hour Energy working. What about the things like taurine and guarana and ginseng, those other ingredients that are supposed to work? We basically know nothing about those. Like, we might know some of the basics of what they might do, but we don't know how they work in combination with other ingredients, and we don't know why they're being used at these specific doses. So for example, for something like vitamin B12 in 5-Hour Energy, that's at about 8,000% the daily recommended dose. And why? Why is it 8,000%? We don't know. So there's a high likelihood that they're not working, or that they're not necessarily working at the correct doses of these things, or that they're just not any better than caffeine. And there are lots of potential problems associated with energy drinks. So first, they have an absurd amount of caffeine. We're talking about between 50 and 500 milligrams per beverage. So to put this in perspective, a Diet Coke is about 50 milligrams, so an energy drink can contain 10 times that amount of caffeine. Now, the typical dose that is said to produce anxiety in people is 400 milligrams. So a single energy drink could be producing that much caffeine to make you feel anxiety. And so those stress, those heart palpitations, that anxiety, those are things that could be produced just by one single drink. Because there is no higher limit here. For colas, we actually regulate the amount of caffeine. So we say around 71 milligrams, you can't have more than that in a single can. But for energy drinks, we don't have that regulation. And so it can cause insomnia. And a lot of people will consume energy drinks with things like alcohol, which is a big deal. This is why they banned Four Loko, because caffeine actually masks the effects of alcohol, so you're more likely to stay up later and you're more likely to drink more because you don't realize how drunk you are. And that is very dangerous because you can overdose on alcohol very easily. And this is not counting some of the long-term effects. So it's going to lead to things like sleep problems. And the problem is that this is probably cyclical. You are in a perpetual cycle of drinking energy drinks to feel awake, but then not being able to have proper sleep because of the energy drinks. We also have the other common problems that are associated with like caffeinated sodas, for example, which have some of the same issues, that caffeine plus that sugar. So what we commonly see is things like obesity and tooth enamel issues. And caffeinated soda consumption is linked to things like drug abuse, which is also linked to things like energy drinks. So people who typically drink more energy drinks are also more likely to use other drugs. Now, this is correlational, not causal, so it could be that people who are likely to use drugs are also then more likely to just drink energy drinks in general, but there is that association. And we do see that some of these problems are specifically linked to that developmental aspect. So starting to drink these when you're a teenager, for example. So we see a lot of problems with behavioral regulation. So lower ability to kind of regulate your own thoughts and actions, as well as problems with metacognition. So thinking about your own thinking. So how did I study for this test? How am I going to succeed at this specific goal? That is the idea behind metacognition. So there are some suggested problems, especially for teenagers, but we don't have a lot of data on this. And what we do have, like I mentioned, doesn't have appropriate control groups, is not well done. So we don't actually know the long-term effects, and we specifically don't know the long-term effects in the group of people who are more likely to be drinking this. So some scientists have suggested that we try to regulate this harm, and certain countries are attempting to do that right now. So first, you could actually make it so that you can only buy it if you're 18 plus, which in some countries this has happened, although those laws don't seem to be working that well. You could make them more expensive, or you could put better labels that warn you of the potential risks, or you could make sure that you're regulating them properly, and especially regulating things like the advertising for them. You could also just ban their sales in schools, or you could make recommendations that say that you can drink them occasionally, but it should not be a daily thing. But we do find that a lot of people who are drinking them don't actually understand the potential problems with them. But knowledge is power here, so go out and tell everyone you know about what you learned. Maybe just think twice the next time you go to grab one at a gas station as to whether you actually need it.